Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes, maybe more than a couple, maybe three, four, or more, to just kind of touch upon and talk about briefly, of course, the recent events at Notre Dame in Paris. Specifically, the organ related events and the improvisations that the four titulaires performed during that ceremony on December 7th, which is now a little over a week ago. And the world at large has had a little time to sort of process all of this. And I've been seeing a lot of feedback from people. And it kind of made me want to just kind of throw in my own little 50 cents toward the whole thing. And let me just start off by saying that I'm a big pipe organ nut, a big fanatic. I have been since I was a kid. As somebody who is into the organ, I have magazines, the recordings, the concerts, the recitals, the people, places, events, you name it. And I've been fortunate on more than one occasion to go to Paris and to attend Mass and a couple of recitals at Notre Dame. I've been in the loft a couple of times, and so on. And so this is coming from a perspective not from a purist or coming from, I guess, some educated elite or coming from a place of any snobbiness or anything. This is coming from the pure perspective of a fanboy. So here it goes. In contrast to what a lot of people think, I enjoyed the crap out of what I saw and heard. Maybe it's because I'm a full organ nut. I like the organ loud and I want it to be thundering and I want chamades and pedals and all that stuff. And of course, Notre Dame is famous for that loud sound, that rumbling loud sound, that Cavaille Coll sound. And of course, the titulaires, all four of them, chose improvisations that were made up on the spot. For those who are not aware, improvisation is not exclusively, but it's a very popular French tradition that dates back centuries, decades, centuries, really, in some cases, where the organists improvise for the liturgy, the various parts of the Mass and other liturgical events and things like that. Well, as somebody who's been to Notre Dame a few times and is aware enough of how things kind of work for the most part as far as music goes, they did what they had to do. They did their job. The four titulaires, they played what they were probably told to. And the interesting thing about that is I don't think that it was the right time to be performing great works of organ literature for the masses. Now, I was excited as hell because as an organ person, let's just be honest, let's be real here for a minute. To the mass public, to the general public, people view the organ as sort of this scary instrument that is mostly found, of course, in churches, but also funeral homes and horror movies with Phantom of the Opera. As a result, it's made me sick to death of Toccata and Fuga D minor because that's really all the general public knows. If you're lucky, they might know the Wedding March or Vitor's Toccata, but they probably don't know it by name. But this was like a huge thing. I mean, this is the first time in pretty much my whole life that I can recall the organ in general getting that much attention to the point where it was on CNN. It was on various news outlets. Various articles were written about it on, music articles, you name it. It was out there, photos of it. There's been, French documentaries that have been floating around for weeks leading up to the reopening and rededication of the cathedral and the organ. And the fact that the cathedral, the clergy, the archbishop made a point to dedicate a segment or a portion of this, I guess you might call it a mass, or I don't think it was a mass, it's more of just a ceremony, but to dedicate a big chunk of the ceremony towards rededicating the organ is huge. It's huge. And I can't recall anything like that happening here in the States. Like I just don't see that kind of thing happening. It doesn't mean that we might not care as much, or maybe we don't, but nevertheless, it happened. And now let me just get this out of the way. If I were the one in charge, maybe I would have chosen a piece of repertoire. I mean, Notre Dame is famous, or has its own famous list of composers that have worked and lived in that building, that dates back decades and centuries even. Probably the more famous of them would be Louis Vierne. And I think maybe they could have chosen one of the finales from one of his 6 symphonies, perhaps. Maybe the first, or the second, or the third. The fourth is a little too dark for that. But, I think, could they have split the finale of one of those symphonies among the 4 of them? I'm sure they could have. But again, I just don't think that was the right time and place for that. Yes, there were world leaders present. There were cameras galore. There were drones flying around. They had cameras on rigging cables that were going back and forth across the nave. They had the works. But I don't believe that was the time and the place to have experienced organ repertoire. And I can tell you, as a visitor to Notre Dame a few times, they've never played any organ literature during any of the masses or vespers that I've attended. It was always, organ audition, or the organ concerts later in the evening or on the weekends, and that sort of thing. So it's not unreasonable, and it was to be expected that they're going to improvise. That's what they've done. That's what they don't perform organ literature during the Mass, during the offertory, communion, the intro, or the sortie. It's always been improvised. And all of them are extraordinary musicians. They're all probably my favorite among the French masters. And they come from a very distinguished sort of like school of French organ improvisation that, it goes back a long time, but it was really like Pierre Cochereau, who also himself was famous at Notre Dame, who really kind of brought it forward and made it into this thing that it's become, for the most part. And so in defense of all 4 of the titulaires, I enjoyed the crap out of those improvisations. I would have preferred the audio to be a little bit better, because I probably would have played it like another 60 times or more, because that's how crazy I am about that kind of stuff. But to have been there would have been awesome. And the thing that I was telling folks just a few days ago, or when it was happening, is the people sitting in that nave who have no sort of knowledge about anything organ related or music related, have no clue what they were witnessing. It was truly a once in a lifetime event. Of course, I was last there with my mentor, Bob Tall, back in 2013, which coincidentally was right after that restoration of the organ then. But this is a whole other level. And to have been able to have been there, to be in the room when it happened, I would have been beside myself. I probably would have peed in my pants. It was just awesome. And I can't thank the titulaires enough for what they did. I know there are a lot of critics out there, a lot of people who would criticize and say, oh, that was just gibberish noise, and just 20 minutes of my life I can't get back, and it was just loud nonsense. Like, I get it. French improvisations aren't for everybody. And I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, I'm pretty sure the music director, the clergy they all sat together with the four titulaires and said, how are we going to go about this ceremony? What should we do? How should things go? And I'm pretty sure it came down to, we're going to improvise. And I think I read someplace, I think it was Olivier Latry that mentioned that he's going to do what he felt in the moment, based on the audience feels, how the audience is reacting, right? And one of the things I love about his improvisation and improvisations in general is that he always starts off with this sort of like rumbling and a foreboding, like foreshadowing, right? And then as he's playing, he builds, he adds more. His registration changes, he adds more stops, more color. It gradually gets louder and louder and louder, um, you know, until something big comes from it. It was meant to be a big explosion, the reawakening of the organ that had been silent for 5 years. I mean, I sat at LAX, going to Hawaii as Notre Dame burned, and to I didn't think they would finish in 5 years, but they did, and it was meant to sort of wake the organ up. It certainly did, and I respect people with different opinions that think that maybe the improvisations weren't what they thought, or maybe it wasn't as musical enough. Um, but they did their job. They are there to serve the liturgy. They're not there to entertain the purists, um, or anybody for that matter, unless it's an organ recital. And I just don't think that was the time or place. Now, again, if I were the one in charge, and I'm not or wasn't, I would have probably chosen a work by Vidor uh, or Vierne, especially because he had very close association and was the titulaire himself for many years at Notre Dame. Or at the very least, maybe Pierre Cocher, one of his transcribed improvisations or something, and they could have split it up. And I spent a few days actually thinking about that, because I've been in a sort of Notre Dame fever where I've listened to various recordings that I've accumulated and collected over the years. And I've sort of closed my eyes and put the AirPods in and cranked the volume up and kind of imagined myself in the situation in that room at that time. And I sort of imagined what pieces probably would have worked between the four of them. Because now you remember, the improvisations were like at least 2 or 3 minutes long, and then there was, the archbishop says his thing, did his thing, and then the next person would respond with the organ, with the grand orgue. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, maybe one of the Vierne finales from the symphonies, or I was listening to Olivier Latry's performance of I think it's the Allegro from the Sixth Symphony of Vidor, and I thought, well, that would have been a good piece to sort of wake the organ up. And then they could have split it into four, and each organist take a turn at a section of the piece until obviously the last one would have drawn it to its conclusion. I just don't know if that would have been a thing, or maybe Olivier Latry could have started with the last couple of pages of the Vidor Toccata, or maybe the last part of Vierne's Sixth Symphony, the finale to that, or the fifth one, the two which I think are a little bit more joyous than his earlier symphonies. I don't think it was probably the place for Franck or anything like that, because I think Franck was more associated with Saint Clotilde, and of course Vidor at Saint-Sulpice, or maybe even Dupré. Dupré had his own association with Notre Dame, as far as I guess you might say temporarily, and I say that with quotes, knowing the history, temporarily replacing Vierne while Vierne was in Switzerland getting treatment for his eyes. And that's a whole other thing. But I would have chosen something by Vierne. I mean, they come to find out later on, though, that they actually did do that. They actually did perform the Kyrie from the Messe Solennelle, which is a fantastic work, which I'm so lucky I have been able to hear live in that building. It doesn't get any better than to hear Messe Solennelle at Notre Dame. And wow, now I guess the only difference is there was an Allen choir organ. I mean, but, and that's another thing. The choir organ was severely damaged by rainwater, spared by the fire itself, but damaged by rainwater. But the metal stuff, I think the metal pipes were spared, will be reused, and all the wood components will obviously have to be rebuilt. And I think from what I've read and understand from people in the know, is that the organ will be expanded with more pipe work and material going in the triforium level to sort of reach into the nave, right? Because that's the main service instrument. And the grand organ, or the grand organ in the back, is the one that responds to the voluntaries and responds, during the offertory and the intro and the sortie and all of that, and for concerts and so on. But I enjoyed the service. I was really excited about it. I mean, it looks beautiful. I wish I could have been there. And I think that all four of those musicians did a fantastic job. And, like, to the naysayers, you weren't the one there. You weren't the one doing it. And at the end of the day, they had a job to do. And their superiors, whether it be, I'm sure they had to answer to the archbishop or whoever is the representative, that whoever the liaison is between the clergy and the music department, like, they had to answer to somebody. So they did what they had to do, and they did a damn good job at it. Like, and I guess I'm just a sucker for loud French organ improvisations. That, maybe I'm biased, but mind you, this is just a small word, a word among many. I'd hardly qualify. I'd hardly classify myself as an educated expert or anything like that. I'm speaking from a position or a point of, or a place of just a fanboy who loves the organ, its music, the people involved for the most part. And that's what it is. I don't think that the rededication ceremony of Notre Dame was meant to show off the great works of literature. That's what the concerts are going to be for. And they've already said that they will have several of those going into next year. And, I know they had the concerts that they, I guess, pre-recorded the day before, that was released on the Stage 9 app, which I did watch. The Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony, the last movement, the Maestoso, also performed by Olivier Letrie, which was pretty solid, although I did think that the organ sounded a little bit muddled or muddied towards the last part of the movement. Probably because the microphones were closer to Dudamel and the orchestra. I would have had it more of the other way around, but that's just me. And of course, a couple of other things, but for the most part, that's all we've gotten so far. And Olivier Letrie and the rest of them are respected. They deserve the adoration. They deserve it. I mean, they did what they had to do. And it's probably the most prestigious cathedral in the world. I mean, yeah, people can say St. Patrick's in New York, or St. John the Divine, and also in New York, or Washington National Cathedral, or the Shrine, also in D.C., or here in Los Angeles area, Christ Cathedral in Garden Grove, where my friend David Ball plays. I mean, all of these are prestigious places, but Notre Dame in Paris is like the cream of the crop. It doesn't get higher than that unless you count the Vatican, but so yeah, that's all I really wanted to say. I think that there is room for all of this stuff. There's room for the literature, and there's also room for the improvisations. And I guess I have been listening to, these improvisations from these organists over in Europe for so long that after a while, and I'm sure many can agree with this, that you kind of understand the DNA. You kind of understand the language. I can hear the themes that they sort of throw in there, and the things that they put in there, and the sort of like the nuances and all that. I can really hear that. And maybe that's why I enjoy it so much, because I know what they're doing. I know that they're developing something or trying to on the fly. And I think that's awesome. So that's all I got, guys. It's just a simple word among many. And yeah, they did what they had to do. And there will be plenty more opportunities to play the great works of literature at Notre Dame. So yeah, that's all I got, guys. Until next time.